Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I'll start by saying it's a pleasure to be following the member for Indi and the member for Higgins, who both brought their medical history and knowledge into this very important topic. And I also hear the member for Indi when she talks about how important it is that we also support reforms for childcare and that childcare is accessible to women across this country, including in regional areas. Of course, that is a huge part of the gender equity puzzle that our government is absolutely trying to address and solve. So thank you for raising those issues as well. Deputy Speaker, I am passionate about paid parental leave, and it will surprise no one in this place to hear that because I bang on about it a lot here, and I feel like I spent most of my first term speaking about it. In fact, in my first speech, I called my husband a unicorn because my family is in the unusual position of Australian families where I work full-time and my husband works part-time. And we're unusual in that situation because our workplace laws, the support we've put around, just have not supported Australian families to be able to be in that position. We have set up a system which is a good system, but which has not really allowed for the gender equity we want to see in our community. And as someone who worked in this building for the last Labor government when we first brought in paid parental leave, I know that that scheme in itself was a game changer, particularly for low-paid women, for women in insecure work. That Labor scheme, that first paid parental leave scheme that we had in this country, was the first time that they had the option of accessing pay after they had a child. So that is a truly game-changing Labor reform. But it's been a decade since we brought that in, so we are well and truly due an update, and that is absolutely what this bill is all about, and I am so proud and pleased to be standing here after a term advocating for action on paid parental leave to say that our government is getting on with it, that we understand that modern families need a flexible scheme that supports mums and dads to take time out with a newborn, to know that they will be supported with pay during that time and that they will have good jobs to go back to. So I'm very pleased to be here today. Deputy Speaker, we know that we have still in this country a huge problem with gender equality. We are just not where we should be. Overall, Australia ranks 43rd out of 146 countries for gender equality. It is not great if you consider where we should be as a wealthy, progressive country, and particularly if you consider that in 2011 we actually ranked 23rd. So we've been going in the wrong direction. Unfortunately, been going in the wrong direction mainly under a previous Liberal national government. It is very much our government's intention to turn that around, to improve gender equality in this country. The gender pay gap remains one of the standout areas where we do need to do so much better. Since 2006, we've dropped from 13th to 36th in women's economic participation. Women make up only 38% of all full-time employees in Australia and 68.5% of the part-time or casual workforce. What a disparity there. We're also ranked 37th for women's representation in senior official and management roles. And we see persistent gaps in industries such as manufacturing, IT and STEM, which continue to be male-dominated, while others such as education are dominated in the other way by women. And what we know is that a lot of this does come back to the way we support women to juggle work and families and the way we support men to juggle work and families. If we have a system that only encourages women to take time out after they've had a baby, what we're saying is that from that point on in a woman's working life, they will be the person who, after taking maybe that initial year off, will then go back to work part-time, probably until their child is in late primary school. At that time, they'll find actually maybe re-entering the workforce full-time is quite a difficult task. It's been a long gap. And then, obviously, we see that flowing on into women's economic security as they get older. And we now see that older women, in fact, are the group most at risk of homelessness in our society. So this is an issue that flows right through women's lives. And at the same time as this is happening for women, men, in fact, we see that their careers, I've seen the data that shows that when men have babies, it's often common that they get a pay rise and they get a promotion. So the exact opposite of what happens for women at that time happens for men. And I know from talking to people in my community, we know from work that's been done in this area, that so many men in our community do want to be able to take more time to be able to care for their children and support their children after they've been born. Unfortunately, our paid parental leave scheme to date has not supported those men to do that. So I am so pleased that this scheme is going to make that change. These changes to paid parental leave will mean more choice for families. There will be more flexibility with how and when they take time off work and how they share care with their partner. There will be more support so that both parents can spend that critical time with their child in those important first 2 years and create a pattern of care throughout their lives. Again, drawing on my own experience here, I do have small children, so this, again, really resonates for me. The massive difference you see when, from the very beginning, my husband has known that there are jobs he does. They're not me telling him to do jobs. It's not me explaining how to change a nappy, how to do the bath, what the routine is. That stuff he knows because he does it and because he's had the privilege of having the time to do that. Not all men in our community have had the privilege of doing that because they have not been in a position where they've been economically supported to do that. So I'm very pleased that this legislation starts to make some change on that. And of course, it gives more opportunity for women to be supported both in their parenting life and their working life. And as I've been talking about, it maximises women's economic equality. So these changes will come into effect on 1 July this year, where we combine the two existing payments, paid parental leave pay and dad and partner pay, into a single 20-week scheme. Removing the notion of a primary and a secondary carer, making it easier for both parents to access the payment. Both parents have the same opportunities, the choice and the flexibility in how and when they choose to take paid parental leave. So families can make decisions about what works best for them. They could take the leave in a continuous block, they could take it in short bursts, even take single days at a time. It means that dads will no longer have to be on unpaid leave from their work to access government PPL. So just like women have been able to, they will be able to access the scheme at the same time as being on paid leave from their work. And a portion of the scheme will still be reserved for each parent so that parents can share the leave and both can take some time at home with their child. And the scheme is also going to be designed to make the transition back to work easier, allowing that flexibility around when you take the leave so it doesn't have to be a continuous block. Over time, we move to 26 weeks of leave by 2026, so delivering a full 6 months of leave. That will be a really important change in our country. And all the evidence from overseas, where a lot of OECD countries do have much more generous paid parental leave schemes than our country, shows us that a strengthened PPL system delivers important benefits to health and well-being, not just for women, not just for men, but of course for children as well. So for parents, more time at home means that they do get to spend that time caring, being part of early childhood development, being the people who know the routines, who set the routines, who can manage the routines, and doing that without having to juggle work at the same time. For children, it means they see that they can be cared by parents of both genders, that mum and dad are both there to do that caring role. And again, if we think about gender equity in this country and the long way we have to go still to achieve gender equity, setting up those norms of gender roles from the very start of a child's life is so important. If a young child sees that mum and dad are both people who can do caring roles, that that's not a role that just goes to women, that changes their whole perspective on how these roles play out, again, throughout our community and throughout our society. We do know at the moment that in Australia, dads take the government paid parental leave scheme at about half the rate of mums. The scheme as it stands has limited the ability of parents to share caring responsibility. And the current eligibility rules have also been unfair for families where the mother is the higher income earner. So in a situation where two families have the same household income, one might in fact be ineligible for government PPL because the mother earns more, whereas another family where the father earns more may have been eligible. Our changes will fix these issues. It is important as we go through this that we continue to take a lens of gender equity to the improvements to the scheme. I very much hope that we will see a use it or lose it component to the scheme. Again, evidence from overseas shows us that take-up by dads of these types of schemes is most likely when there is a portion that is reserved just for fathers, and that encourages men to see that as a scheme that is there for them, that they can access, and that they are in fact responsible for their children for. And I want to commend Australian businesses for how they have also been approaching supporting Australian families with combining work and early caring responsibilities. We do know that a lot of businesses in recent years have really changed the way they run their paid parental leave schemes. They now look at much more of an equity model where leave can be taken by men and by women, again moving away from this role of primary and secondary carers. So it will be good to see this updated scheme, this much improved scheme from our government, working hand in hand with employers across our country, delivering the best outcomes for businesses, for parents and for kids. We also obviously are doing a lot of work in other areas. Paid parental leave is just one way. Our government is improving workforce participation and equality for women in our country. Last year, our government set up the Women's Economic Equality Task Force, chaired by Sam Moyston AO, and they've been tasked with advising us on how we improve women's equality right throughout the economic sphere. Because we do know that single reforms or changes, even super important ones like this paid parental leave, won't do all the work in of themselves. We need to work across the spectrum to make sure that women can realise their full potential in the economic sphere, as well as in their caring roles. So the task force is focusing on how gender-responsive policy and budgeting will advance gender equality in Australia and the measures that we need to make this happen. They're looking at issues like the gender pay gap, workforce participation, patterns of paid and unpaid care, safe and respectful workplaces, and planning for skills and industries of the future. And they've already, of course, recognised, and our government has acted to do all we can to raise wages in heavily feminised industries such as childcare and aged care. Again, those caring roles that traditionally we've seen as women's roles, industries which are heavily dominated by women and which for too long have been underpaid, and which we need to make sure women are supported in those industries, are able to work in those industries. And that goes hand in hand, obviously, with our government's efforts to make childcare more affordable for Australian families. Again, once paid parental leave ends, most families get to that point where they need to access paid childcare. And again, the evidence has told us that the cost of childcare in this country has just shut too many families out, that for many women, the economic decision when they've finished their paid parental leave and they're looking to return to work has been a decision where they've had to say, well, I can only do 3 days a week because I earn less than my husband or partner. The childcare fees are so expensive that actually I'll be working for nothing on that 4th or 5th day. Our reforms to make childcare cheaper for 96% of Australian families will very much change that equation for Australian families. So we are making it easier for Australian families, for men and women, to share the caring load from birth with an improved paid parental leave scheme to that point where your children are entering childcare, allowing for that ongoing flexibility, that ongoing sharing of roles that we know is good for Australian families, is good for our children, and is good for our whole community. As we see women being able to increase their participation in the workforce, we see men being able to take up roles that many of them want to be able to do, to care for their children, to be an active part of their family life. And we see all of that as our government continues to work to close the gender pay gap, to support women in low-paid industries. This is a really exciting day to be speaking here on such a bill that has been 10 years coming, but which I know will make a huge difference to the lives of Australian women and to Australian families.